Hi guys, it's Miss Jordan back for another story time. And today we're going to start with a special hello song. Do you remember the hello song we did during our last story time? It involves a clap, a waving hand, and some stomping feet. Here we go, ready? We clap and say hello, we clap and say hello. With our friends at story time, we clap and say hello. We wave and say hello, we wave and say hello. With our friends at story time, we wave and say hello. We stomp and say hello, we stomp and say hello. With our friends at story time, we stomp and say hello. We clap and say hello, we clap and say hello. With our friends at story time, we clap and say hello. We wave and say hello, we wave and say hello. With our friends at story time, we wave and say hello. We stomp and say hello, we stomp and say hello. With our friends at story time, we stomp and say hello. That was awesome, you guys. Great job. Alrighty, you guys, we gotta get up and move a little bit before we sit down and read our book. So why don't you stand on up with me and we're gonna do our beginning book stretches. Do you remember them? They involve opposites. All right, stand up, let's go. Are you ready? Say, this is big. This is small. This is short. And what's the opposite of short? Tall. And this is fast, 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 fast. And this is slow. And then we say this is yes, and this is no. One more time, really fast. Ready? This is big. This is small. This is short. This is tall. This is fast, 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 fast. And this is slow, slow, slow. This is yes. And this is no. Good job. Today I brought with me a very special book. It's called A Stone Sat Still. And it was written and illustrated by Wenzel. This book is all about what? What do you think it's all about? I'll show you the cover again. Ready? A stone sat still. What do you think it's about? Is it about the slug? Is it about the stone? You think it's the stone? Well, it is called A Stone Sat Still, so that kind of makes sense. Should we read and find out? Yeah, let's give it a read. All right, here we go, you guys. A stone sat still. A stone sat still with water, grass, and dirt. And it was as it was where it was in the world. And the stone was dark. And the stone was bright. Who's that? Is that an owl? Well, it is nighttime and owls come out at night, right? And the stone was loud. And then the stone was quiet. And it sat where it sat with the water, grass, and dirt. And it was as it was where it was in the world. And the stone, it was rough. Do you see all those rough bumps on the stone? And the stone, well, it was smooth. Look how smooth it is compared to that pointy porcupine. And the stone was green, red, purple. Do you see it back there? And blue. Just behind the fox, the stone was blue. And the stone, well, it was a pebble. Look, compared to this big moose, that stone, is just the size of a pebble. And the stone, well, it was a hill. Look at that tiny little creature trying to climb up that stone, and it is just so big for him. And the stone was a feel. Look how they held on. And the stone, well, it was a smell. Look, he's sniffing the stone. And it sat where it sat with the water, grass, and dirt. And it was as it was where it was in the world. And the stone, oh my gosh, it was wild. And the stone, it was home. And the stone was a kitchen. Look, they're gonna have a snack. And the stone was a throne. Look how he sits almighty on that stone. And the stone was a marker. See? And a map. Look at this ant traveling across the stone like a map. And a maze. For this tiny little ladybug, the stone is a maze. It was a danger and a haven, a story and a stage. And the stone was a blink. And the stone was an age. In the stone, it was an island for this guy. Look, above all the water, and the stone was a wave. And the stone, it was a memory. And the stone was always. Have you ever known such a place? Where with the water, grass, and dirt, a stone sits still in the world. The end. Wow, that book was super cool. It had all different kinds of animals in it. It had really big animals, right? Do you guys remember any of the really big animals that we saw in that book? There was a big, huge moose. Yeah, do you remember him? And what about a tiny animal? Did you see any tiny creatures in that book? Yeah, there were tiny creatures like tiny ants, right? And that tiny slug that was on the cover, do you remember that? Let's look. Oh, there he is, so tiny compared to that rock. Well, in this story, maybe you guys noticed that the big animals, they thought that that stone was really tiny. And the tiny creatures, well, they thought that stone was really big. And that is because they had different perspectives. That word, perspective, is the word we use to describe when someone sees something one way and another person sees something the other way. So like this big bear, for example. Here he is, Mr. Bear. How you doing, Mr. Bear? Oh, I'm just dandy. When Mr. Bear sees a stone, like this one here, he thinks, well, that stone is just the perfect size to fit in my mouth. It is so tiny. Right? Oh my goodness. Mr. Bear is so big compared to that stone. But what if we, oh, thank you, Mr. Bear. What if we looked at a tinier creature, like a ladybug. And we asked the ladybug, Miss Ladybug, what do you think about this stone? Well, that stone is awfully big, but it's the perfect place for me to rest my head. Oh my gosh, it is awfully perfect for her to rest her head. Because to the ladybug, this rock is pretty small, and it's just the perfect size for her. Let's try another creature. How about, let's see, who else do I have today? I have a huge, enormous caterpillar. Compared to this rock, this caterpillar is what? Big or small? This caterpillar is pretty big. What do you think, Mr. Caterpillar? What is your perspective? What do you think about this stone? Well, I think that stone is way too small. Well, Mr. Caterpillar, you're right. That stone is too small for you. Let's try one more creature. Who do we have here? Look, it's Miss Bird. Miss Bird, what do you think about this stone? Well, I think this stone is just the perfect size. It's just tiny enough for me to rest my feet on. And look, she's right. Because compared to this bird, this stone is just the perfect tiny size. After reading that story, I decided I wanted a little bit more practice on perspective and seeing when things are really big versus when things are really small. Two opposite features. So I drew a little tiny stone right in the middle of the page, and then I drew some small creatures, some creatures that would think, oh my goodness, that rock is enormous. I decided to draw some worms. And then I drew a really big creature, a creature that would look at that rock and say, oh my gosh, that rock is so small. I drew a big red dog. What could you guys draw? Do you guys want to try it out? Thank you so much for listening to Storytime today. I had so much fun with you. It's time to sing our goodbye song. Are you ready? Here we go. We clap and say goodbye. We clap and say goodbye. With our friends at Storytime, we clap and say goodbye. We wave and say goodbye. We wave and say goodbye. With our friends at Storytime, we wave and say goodbye. We stomp and say goodbye. We stomp and say goodbye. With our friends at Storytime, we stomp and say goodbye. Thanks so much for listening, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye.